One of the biggest challenges colleges face is keeping alumni connected after graduation. Events, reunions, fundraising, it's a lot to manage. And honestly, most schools are piecing it together with different tools that don't really talk to each other. That's why Alumni Q has built their all-in-one platform just for higher ed. It handles the everyday stuff, emails, giving, membership, directories, and it makes it all work together in one place. No more messy systems. And here's the cool part. If you've ever planned a reunion, you know how chaotic it can get. Alumni Q has something called Signature Events that takes the pain out of big milestones. Think smarter registration, built-in giving, real-time reporting, and even printing name tags on the fly. It's like having an extra teammate who never sleeps. So if your school is ready to simplify alumni engagement and actually strengthen connections, check out alumniq.com and request a demo.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for listening to Alumless for February 27th, 2026. This is the State of Mentoring and Alumni Engagement Edition. I'm Ryan Catherwood, and today I am joined by the incomparable Kim Infanti, my CMAC colleague, and by day, Syracuse University's Executive Director of Alumni and Constituent Engagement. Kim is pitch hitting for Chris today, who is out. Kim, how you doing? It's good to see you.
I'm doing great. I'm battling a little bit of a cold, but 'tis the season in Syracuse, but I'm doing great, Ryan. And we were just chatting before the show. This is a real full circle moment for us. So it'll be a fun topic to talk through. I don't even remember what year it was we first connected on this exact topic.
Right. So I want to say I was at Washington and Lee University, and that would have been something like 2010 to 2012. And at the time, you were running Syracuse University's LinkedIn page.
Yeah.
I think was it for the Career Center at the time?
Yeah. When I was hired, we had this, it was called the Mentor at SU program. It wasn't on LinkedIn. It was this clunky matchmaking system through a tool that doesn't even exist anymore. It was awful. Yeah. And then we shifted it to a network group, or like a, Q's Connect, we called it, on LinkedIn. And you and I had some good talks about the early days of those LinkedIn groups. And now, 15 years later, it's so different.
15 years later. And yet so much of the same.
Yes. Yep.
As it is still a nut that we have not necessarily cracked, but we have a great guest today to kind of figure out the state of mentoring and alumni engagement. As you all know, if you're dialing in and listening live to us on LinkedIn or YouTube, we are actually not live today. We are pre-recorded. We got some scheduling challenges this week, but please do say hello in the comments section on LinkedIn, because we will tune in to the comments and be responding to those questions. If you're listening to us by podcast, we appreciate you adding us to your feed, and we are grateful for the teams at Protopia, Alumni Q, and Givesy for being our Alumless presenting sponsors for Season 4. Kim, when I say the word mentoring, what emotions do you feel? Like what comes to mind in terms of mentoring, the mentoring proposition in our field, I suppose?
So 2 things came to mind for me. Number 1, heebie-jeebies. Number 2, pressure.
Pressure? Is that what you said?
Pressure. So
pressure, yeah.
For me, the word mentoring kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies, and I don't know if it's PTSD from that first Mentor at SU program that I ran when I came to SU in 2010, or if it's just seeing that there's just been so many iterations of it and so many different ways you can go, or seeing how students respond to that word. At least here in Syracuse, this is a very personal feeling for me, that at least students here, when you say the word mentor, that really puts the pressure on, and they are very shy to pursue anything that has that word mentor in it. That's kind of that's my response to mentoring, but I'm open to it.
Well, yeah, to your point, like it's definitely something that I feel like depending on who you ask, there's a different feeling about the word. And I think a lot of senior administrations are really eager to try to figure this out. And alumni, so many of them are interested in being mentors, particularly if it's not such an in-depth commitment to be a volunteer, because I feel like it does kind of imply that you're kind of personally responsible for someone's success, particularly a student or a recent graduate. But let me ask you this. All right, so finish this sentence. Mentoring that involves alumni can flourish when
you make it easy and take the pressure off.
Okay.
So
Make it easy.
make it
Take the
easy,
pressure
take the
off.
pressure off. So to me, mentoring is very much like a relationship. Like I am committing, like I'm going to find myself a mentor, but it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be that much pressure. And I think if we're able to educate administrators and students and alumni on how these can simply be connections that yield something good, it doesn't have to be a lifelong relationship, that you can really have a lot of buy-in for these so-called mentoring programs or mentoring, however you're referring to them at your school or college. So just take the pressure off and help students see that you have a powerful alumni network, an alumni network that wants to help, and that person doesn't have to be in your career for 30 years. And if they become someone who's part of your career for 30 years, amazing. But don't go into it like it's like a first date. Don't go into it like just no pressure. That's my thought.
I think that's right. I mean, but I feel like what came to mind when I was thinking about this were two things. One, well, really, it's one big thing, which is when students are required to do it.
Right.
Whether it's
Yeah.
through a class or whether it's through, a peer or like a core curriculum component, right?
Uh-huh.
Where everyone is required to do mentoring, or whether it's part of a grade. Because I feel like one of the big challenges, we'll talk to Allison about this.
Yeah.
Because our special guest today, Allison McWilliams from Wake Forest, she is an expert on mentoring. And I think that it's clear that at a lot of schools, maybe not all schools, that mentoring is something that happens really when it is mandated. But maybe that's not true in all populations. It's just been kind of my experience that students are less likely to opt into these types of programs. Alumni incredibly enthusiastic. All right, let's bring out our special guest today, Allison McWilliams, who knows way more about this than I do. Hey, Allison, how are you?
Hi, I am great. And I was just listening to your conversation. I don't think you need me here at all. I loved
we
everything
do.
that y'all had to say. So that's enough. We can just close it off
Just
and
go
be done.
home. Go home.
That's right. You've got it handled.
Well, we are so glad you're here. Mentoring is something I think Kim and I have both thought about quite a bit over the years. And Allison, you and I have talked about mentoring over the years a number of different times, in different contexts. You are serving as the Assistant Vice President for Mentoring and Alumni Personal and Career Development at Wake Forest University. Maybe you could do some table setting. Can you share just a little bit about your role and the organizational structure there at Wake Forest that supports this alumni engagement activity?
I know it's a long title. So
it is a long title. 2 ands in there.
I know. Once an ampersand, it's a whole thing. So my team, I have a team of 3, and we sit in our career office, which is called the Office of Personal and Career Development. And that serves the entire university, with one caveat that we have a sort of a separate team in the business school, but we all report up in the same way. I think we're going to get into this a little bit later, but my team sort of sits kind of squarely on that personal side of the personal and career development, especially with the mentoring piece. And I'm a Wake Forest alum. I came back in 2010 to create the Mentoring Resource Center, which is a campus-focused center. I always say we have a centralized office that runs a decentralized model of mentoring. So we do not run mentoring programs. We do not maintain a master database of mentors. We don't do matching, any of that. But we will serve as on-campus consultants to people all around the campus who are doing that work, and do a lot of education and training and resource development. And then we also oversee the Alumni Personal and Career Development Center, which is point of graduation forward career support. There is also an alumni career team in the business school that we partner with. And then there's the Office of Alumni Engagement, which sits in advancement. And we do a lot of partnering with them, but we have a different reporting line. So if that's
very
helpful.
unique, actually, to have sort of that different reporting line.
Yeah.
I was just up at Dartmouth College, and they have just adjusted it, I think, to essentially the type of reporting structure that you were describing, Allison. But maybe you could share at Wake Forest, do you have a working definition of mentoring, and what is mentoring and what is not mentoring?
Yeah. And it's actually one of the first things I did when I came to Wake was spend a lot of time working on a definition, because I felt like it was really important. One of the things that I say a lot is, mentoring is not a profession. There is no governing body that sets policy, that sets parameters. And so anybody who has a mentoring program has a definition of some sort, and they are all different and they're all basically the same. But so ours is that it is a purposeful and personal relationship in which a more experienced person provides guidance, feedback, and wisdom to facilitate the growth and development of a less experienced person. And I key in on a few things with that, unlike where mentoring started, thousands of years ago, it is an experience differential. And so, you are looking for someone who has experience in that thing in which you are seeking mentorship around. And that means you can be mentored by someone who's younger than you. So we're no longer thinking like older and younger, even though typically that is sort of how it shakes out, right? And the mentor is a facilitator of growth and development, but the mentee is the one that should be doing most of the work in that relationship. And then, to Kim's point earlier, it is a relationship, right? And it is purposeful, it's intentional. That does not mean that it has to last for the rest of your life. It could last 6 weeks, but there is some intention behind it. And I'm pretty firm on this when I think about mentoring, and especially sitting in a career office where we do a lot with networking. And I think networking is super important, and having networking contacts is critical to your ability to get a job, to your career trajectory. There's a lot of different types of relationships that we can have. And none of those things are mentoring. So mentoring is like at a very high relational level. And not everything should rise to that level, right? Sometimes you just need someone to be a wise counselor and give you some advice. Sometimes you need someone who's going to be more of a coach or an accountability partner, or again, a networking contact. And a very rare number should actually, rise to that level of like full-on mentor, because it does require commitment. It does require that relationship piece that I think is really important. And I think, back to some of the things you were saying before too, and it's important that everybody understands that, right? The education piece behind it. And especially when we're talking across an institution, do the people in leadership understand? And I think often they don't. Right? They don't understand what mentorship means when we're talking about deploying these programs.
They think we should do it because it's a buzzword,
right,
and everybody is doing
Correct.
it. Let's do mentoring. We should
That's
do a mentoring
right.
program. Right?
That's right.
Love your definition, and I love the differentiation between a mentoring program and networking. And I think a lot of times they become very much like this, and that's not always the best approach. So you touched on this a bit in your definition, but what kind of environment or what kind of logistics need to be in place to do mentoring at scale? But is that even possible? Because you just described mentoring as a personal relationship. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you mean by that, right? So are we doing introductions at scale? Sure. Are we doing connections at scale? Sure. But I firmly believe that mentoring is a one-to-one. Sometimes you can have a small group model, but generally speaking, we're talking a one-to-one relationship. So are we scaling that? No, I don't think so. What I do think we can do is think about how do we build a culture of mentoring? How do we take the tools and strategies that great mentors use around asking great questions and helping people to set goals and pursue them, around building effective relationships and what that means, around seeking out feedback and giving feedback and holding people accountable? Can we infuse that across an institution and make the institution better? Absolutely. Can we think about how to encourage people at scale to seek out mentorship, right? And certainly there are a lot of tools and programs out there that help, but I think, fundamentally they're helping with the introduction and the connection. They are not going to do the mentoring for anybody, because mentoring is a human-to-human connection point.
Introductions and connections lead to mentoring, right? But
they can.
There has to be a relationship and a desire there between both parties to do it, right?
And I think this is part, and Ryan, you and I have talked about this. This is my problem with mentoring online mentoring platforms, is I think a lot of people think it is, just by virtue of making the introduction, just by virtue of making the connection, mentorship will happen. And that is not true, right? There's so many other things that have to go into that. And a lot of people are using them as a way, to do the scale and to make their lives easier. But the relationship piece still has to happen.
And do you find that students want mentors? And how are you, like, are they coming to your office or
Some.
to your partners and saying, I want a mentor? And how are you educating them?
Yeah, I think some do. And I think mainly it's because we've told them they should, right? But I think fundamentally, particularly undergrad, and, we have a traditional undergrad age population here, so that's kind of who I'm talking about. They're pretty transactional at this stage of life, and they want a job. They want connections. They want someone to help them get into graduate school. And so at a basic level, I think they think they want it. But for the masses, I think there's a select group that would very much, desire it and thrive it and find it in all the ways that are helpful to them.
All right, hold that thought, Allison. We're going to take a quick break with a word from our sponsor, and we will be right back.
Your alumni love helping students and fellow graduates, but they simply don't have time to attend every event, answer every call, or learn yet another online platform. With Protopia, making an impact is easier than it's ever been before. Ever. There's no new app to sign up for or use in our already busy lives. Students, alumni, or even staff can quickly ask for advice or networking via a simple form, email, or text. Protopia's artificial intelligence searches the institution's existing alumni data to find the best experts that are the most likely to assist based on experience, availability, location, and other factors. Each matched alum receives a direct, blind email to ask them to help, giving alumni full control over if and how they want to respond, whether that's by email, call, or a virtual meeting. And if it's not a good time, Protopia's AI simply reaches out to the next alum until the question has been answered. The student receives advice right into her email inbox and is coached to engage the alum to grow her professional network. Finally, our rich dashboard lets staff follow along, view detailed engagement analytics, and access updated alumni data. Protopia. Simple for them, simple for you.
All right, we are back with our guest today, Allison McWilliams from Wake Forest University. I guess I wanted to ask you a little bit. I know you are familiar with the landscape in this part of, engagement, mentoring programs. What are the best mentoring programs out there that you're familiar with? Could be your own.
Yeah.
And why? What makes a great mentoring program that connects alumni and students or alumni with other graduates?
Yeah. I like our model. I would not call us a program, but I do like our model in terms of that kind of diffused, process across the university. The very best program I know is the Marquette Mentor Program run by Dan DeWert. And the reason for it is he's been really intentional about how he's grown it. And it is student to alumni, but there's also a faculty and academic component to it, right? And that puts some teeth into it. It is highly structured. There's an accountability piece into it. There's a commitment, like the students have to say that this is going to be, and they sign something, this has to be one of their top 3 commitments that they're going to participate in. And there's a lot of support that goes into it. And it has grown each year, but grown really intentionally. And he's had those moments where, the administration has come to him and said, great, if you're doing this for 100 students, do it for 1,000. And he has really smartly pushed back on that and given them the data why. And it's a tremendous program and has really terrific outcomes around it. Outcomes both for the students, for the alums. The alums like it so much that they have endowed his position. They, they give back financially. They give back in terms of coming back year over year to serve as mentors. Yeah, it's a terrific program.
Well, I was not familiar with it prior to this podcast, but I will familiarize myself with Marquette's program. Do you think he or others, what, in your opinion, what role has technology played in allowing mentoring to flourish? I don't know if Marquette uses it or if you have any at Wake that are using tech.
Yeah, we don't. And again, I sort of have a bias against it for the reasons. We use it in other ways, right? We're a LinkedIn school, We have, Handshake and 1220 and things of that nature. We have an internal alumni directory kind of thing. But in terms of like a platform, we don't use it. I don't believe he does. I believe he may have pulled in some tech, but generally speaking, they do in-person interviews with all of the students. They do hand matching. It's a very hands-on kind of program. So again, I think technology, it shows up in two ways, right? So again, it can be a great way to get people connected that you wouldn't otherwise get connected with, right? I think that's terrific. And I think one of the things that we've learned, like what we're doing right now, right, particularly during COVID and everything that's come since then, is there are tools that now allow people to connect in ways that we couldn't do before, in terms of, it doesn't have to be a phone call. It doesn't have to be an in-person, that you can actually have a face-to-face with somebody who's not sitting right in front of you. That said, anytime you put a screen, you've got a barrier in between you, right? And so you have to be aware of that. But yeah, so I think technology has some real positives to it. I just think we have to be really clear about what we're doing and why.
You think like the main problem with the technology is it's sort of been promised to like, oh, it'll happen at scale, it'll do itself, right? Yep. And what you're describing is a very hands-on, regimented, structured program, right? Like the one at Marquette, that very simply, it cannot be done without significant human resources dedicated to using the technology effectively. And it just cannot be propped up and watch it happen, right?
That's right. And yeah, and again, we're talking about a relationship between humans, and I don't personally want to get away from that. Right. I think then we're talking about something else entirely. The entire point of mentoring is to be in relationship with another human being. So why would we want to get rid of that piece of it? And I do think, a tool is a tool, right? And tools can be great, but, the tool is only going to be as good as the people using the tool. I mean, I always use the example of like Microsoft Word. I think Microsoft Word is tremendous. I use it every day, right? It does some really great things. I'm thankful that it will check my spelling for me and my grammar and other things like, it's not going to do the writing for me. Like I have to sit down and actually write the thing. And so in a very similar way, like a mentoring tool isn't going to do the mentoring for anybody. And I think the problem too with these programs, whether you're using a tool or not, the moment something goes wrong, like you've lost someone. So the moment a program is not successful, well, you're going to have a hard time getting people to join it again next time. And the moment someone shows up and reaches out on a platform to someone and doesn't get a response, especially if you're talking about a college student, they're not going to be super energized to reach out a second time and a third time. Or if they have they have a contact, but it doesn't go the way they want it to. And vice versa, for adults too.
A lot of alumni, right, sign up with the promise of helping a student. Right. If you ask alumni, the one thing they all want to do is help a student. They sign up for these different types of mentoring programs through technology typically, and then they never hear anything. And it's a great way to feel bad, right? To almost guarantee that alumni will have a bad takeaway from that experience. Which brings me perfectly to the next question, Kim, which is how do you ensure that the alumni and students that volunteer to participate in the mentoring programs around Wake Forest, right? That you're ensuring that the academic departments, the faculty, right, the administrative groups who are facilitating mentoring programs, that everyone has a good experience. How do you coach that? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm not sure you can ensure it, but I do like what Kim said earlier, right? Like, how are we making it easier for people? And, I always talk about mentoring as being a strategic intervention. And just like you would with anything else strategic, right? What are your goals? How are you setting clear expectations? Are you giving people the tools, the information that they need to be successful for whatever it is that you're asking them to do? Again, are you providing some structure? Are you providing some accountability measures? Are you providing some support along the way? I think if you do all of those things, and I think, a lot of best practices and research bears this out, you have the best chance of it being successful. And again, you're dealing with human beings, and humans are messy, and sometimes they don't do the things that you want them to do. Sometimes they don't show up and participate in the ways that you want them to. And of course, everything that we're talking about right now is formal mentoring programs, and the other side of it is all of those informal mentoring relationships that happen more organically and are shown to be actually more successful, but also lack a lot of the guardrails that formal programs can provide, And so if you want to get out of that relationship, that may be a harder thing to do. Or if things aren't going the way that you want them to be going, how do you have those conversations? So, I think from our perspective at Wake, again, we see ourselves as a resource center. And so our job is to provide a lot of education, a lot of resources. And a lot of what we're doing there, we do it with people who are running formal programs, and we provide a lot of support for that. But also getting into those spaces where some of that informal mentoring might happen. So, whether it's in an academic department or residence life and housing or, some other, department on campus, even here in our own career office with our career coaches, and talking to them about sort of what are the expectations of a good mentoring relationship. When is it appropriate for you to be taking on that role and when not? How do you provide appropriate support for those relationships?
So real quick, Allison, definition of success, generally speaking, how should programs be measuring success and stewarding those who participate?
So again, being strategic about it, it goes back to your goals. And so it always worries me when I see someone say, we're going to do a campus-wide mentoring program for our students, because what your first-year students need and what your seniors need are two totally different things.
Yes.
Right? And so, not to mention the sophomores and the juniors. So, what are your goals and how are you measuring success against those goals? If you have those set up in the beginning, then you will be much better able to measure that success at the end, And then there's the, you can do pre-post. But I also think we have to recognize that the benefits and the impacts of mentoring often are long-term change processes, right? And so I think a lot of administrators want to say, let's have this mentoring program and show direct impact, when that impact may come a year from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And so there has to be this kind of ongoing collection of data and measurement to assess against that.
What's been the most successful mentoring program at Wake?
And so what's so interesting about it is they evolve, right?
Yeah.
And so at one point in time, our business school had an incredibly successful mentoring program that was student to alumni and reached so many people. They had 3 full-time staff that did nothing but run that program. That's how intensive it was. And we had change in leadership, and so it doesn't exist anymore, right? We have a student advising program that has evolved over time, and gone from being straight student orientation advisors to a more in-depth mentoring model as our academic advising model has changed. So I'd probably point to those two. And then we've had some small programs. We have a program that's now running, on its 15th year. That's a 1 year. It's really for young alumni. So it's a 1-year fellowship post-graduation. And they each get at least one, if not 2, administrative mentors that work with them through that entire year. And so, that's an incredibly successful program as well.
So I will just wrap up this first part of our show, and then we're going to move to record our 30-minute bonus segment with Allison. We're going to do that right now. And then we'll drop the podcast version of Alumless as soon as we can. And we just want to thank those who joined us here on LinkedIn, who joined us to listen. And podcast listeners, we'll be right back.